Hey friend, and welcome to the Camera Brave Show. My name's Marissa, and I help people fearlessly create content and find their own beautiful voice. In this show, we talk all about strategy, mindset, and confidence, not to mention the power of storytelling through my personal favorite thing, video. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's dive right in. Hello, friend, and welcome back to another episode of the Camera Brave Show. My name's Marissa, your video marketing coach, teaching you how to take stunning videos and feel confident on camera. This is episode number 41, and today we are diving into the second part of a two-part podcast where I'm talking all about creating your own podcast. I have been getting a lot of DMs and questions, both on my social media and inside of my private coaching group, with so many of you that are interested in launching your own podcast. So I decided, okay, we've gotten to a big number, 40. It's time to give the people what they want and talk some more about what it actually takes to have a podcast week in and week out. So before listening to this episode, if you have not yet, go back to episode number 40 and listen to that one first, because that episode, I talk all about creating the pillars of your podcast, meaning all of the things you're going to actually talk about on your show. That is exactly where you should start. We want to start with value, content, and then build all of our assets from there. So if you have not yet, go check out that episode and actually do the work. Think about what sort of pillars you would want to touch on, the goals of your business, all the things. In order for this to make sense, you have to do that legwork. Make it worth it, because listen, a podcast is going to take up your time every week. Is it worth it? That's up to you. If it doesn't make sense for you, don't jump into it just because it sounds fun or exciting, because then you're either going to burn out or you're going to get a couple of episodes in and then be like, you know what, this isn't for me. So really take the time and be intentional about it. Make sure that it's aligned with your goals for your business. So that way it's going to propel you forward, grow your audience, and all the good things. Real quick, before we dive on in, I did want to read a review that was left for the Camera Brave Show on Apple Podcasts. The Camera Brave Show takes such a genuine, authentic approach to truly understanding what your message is, finding your voice, then trusting yourself enough to grow. I love Marissa's vulnerability in her own journey and how passionate she is about helping other entrepreneurs and content creators really step into their own confidence. Thank you so much for that review. I deeply appreciate that. If you've been listening to the show and enjoying it, first of all, it is very helpful to the show to take just a quick moment out of your time and leave us an Apple Podcast review. So incredibly helpful, first of all. Second of all, it is one of the few ways that I actually get to know what points you're loving in the podcast and what is actually helpful to you. It makes me so happy to see the efforts of what I've been putting all of this work into and see the effect that they're having on people. I see it on social media and I see it in other places, but leaving it here in a review is absolutely the most impactful way to let me know that you're enjoying the show and that you're learning and growing. It can only be a sentence or two, anything that you truly feel that you have gotten from this show. If you would please just take a moment of your time and go leave that in a review on Apple Podcast, I would greatly appreciate you. Alrighty, let's dive on into episode 41. This episode has a free guide with it. So this episode, we're talking all about the assets that you are going to need to create your own podcast. I have actually been asked by several people, and I'm not just saying that, I think 3 or 4 people have asked me for a launching guide or a checklist or a step-by-step how to launch a podcast. If I've heard it that many times from people, that means it's time to create it, right? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to teach you the things, whether they're video or audio, that you need to know. So that's what we're talking about in this episode. And I did create a free guide. You can find it in the show notes here in this episode, and you can print it out. I'm such a big pen and paper person. So just about everything that you get from me that is a guide is going to be printable and meant to be checked off, because that is how my brain works. So please download your copy of the free guide and use it to walk through, first of all, to know exactly what it's going to take. And then second of all, to actually be your guide for when if you're feeling that the podcast is the next step. I'm going to guess that you are heavily considering creating your own podcast. If you're listening to this episode, seeing as it's a 2-part series, and this is part 2, I feel like if you were a little interested, maybe you'd listen to last episode. But if you're listening in to this point in episode 41, where we're doing the second part, I feel like you're pretty heavily invested in creating your own podcast. So I'm just going to assume that if you are listening at this point, that a podcast is aligned with your goals. That is the first thing you need to figure out, though. You've got to figure out if it makes sense for you to create a podcast, do some digging, do that reflective work. And then if you decide it's the right step for you, let's dig on in this episode. So, launching your podcast, the first thing, after you define your pillars, of course, the first thing to do is name your podcast. Now, I've numbered these just to kind of help break them down more. You can do them out of order. It does not actually have to be done in a step-by-step order. So this is the order that I think makes sense logically. If you want to do it in a different order that makes sense for you, please do so. It really does not have to be numerical. I just numbered them. So there are 7 steps that I have total for you. The first step, naming your podcast. So there's 3 main things that I see people do when they're naming a podcast. So when people name their podcast, there's typically 3 different avenues to explore. The first one is naming the podcast after your business. I know a lot of you guys are entrepreneurs or have your own business. So one option is to name your podcast after your business. The second option, name the podcast after yourself. The Marissa Allen Show. That's another option. And then the third option is to name your show based on the content. And this I see a lot in bigger names like, for instance, Amy Porterfield. She's a marketing and course expert, but her podcast is not called The Amy Porterfield Show. Her podcast is called Online Marketing Made Easy, something like that, or Digital Marketing Made Easy with Amy Porterfield. Jay Shetty, his podcast is not The Jay Shetty Show. It's On Purpose with Jay Shetty. There is really no exact one way to go about it. I personally think presenting the value up front is something that will tell your audience more about your show versus if it's just your name. Unless you are well known, unless you have a large audience, I think it's more difficult to grow a following by naming your show after yourself. That's one reason why this is not called the Marissa Allen Show. I've wanted to have my own show for years, but I have worked hard to build my business. And I started this podcast only 6 months after starting my business. So I did not want to start something separate from my business. I wanted to start something that was a part of my business. And I'm big on making things easy. So I started Camera Brave. That's the name of my business. My podcast is the Camera Brave Show. My monthly coaching group is the Camera Brave Club. And my 6-week online course is the Camera Brave Academy. Do you see a common thread here? I just want things to be super simple and everything makes sense. So for me, that is what started the Camera Brave Show. I did put the word show in there instead of just Camera Brave podcast, because I knew upfront that there was going to be a visual component of the show. I have dreams for it being shot in a beautiful studio one day, similar to the Rachel Hollis show, or it's not the Rachel Hollis show, it's Rach Talk is the name of her show. So I see my podcast expanding into so many different ways. So that is why it is the Camera Brave Show. So those are 3 different avenues to consider: naming it after your business, after yourself, or after the content that you are going to be talking about. I would recommend either your business or your content, but tying it into the value of what your audience is going to get in the title, if you can. So Camera Brave, I talk about being on camera and with video. So to me, camera is that heavy indicator. It's not just called like the confidence podcast. That would be tough for me because I speak so much about video. So if you are wanting to talk more about marketing, having that buzzword marketing in your title, it's just a very helpful indicator to your potential audience that, hey, this is something for me right now. Number 2, creating your cover art. Please have fun with this part. Please do not get stuck on this part as well. Your cover art should be a very exciting little process for you because it's one of the few tangible things that you have with your podcast. This is the visual cover art that people will see when they search for your show. So you do want to name it first because you want to have the name of your podcast on your cover art. If you have a business, you could include your business logo on there. If you have a nice, clean headshot, you could incorporate your headshot into the cover art. You see that most commonly if you search up. Now, keep in mind, most of the podcasts that I'm referencing are in the marketing field because that's my industry. So maybe take some time and search, say if you're in the fitness industry, maybe search what fitness podcasts typically look like. But I know for marketing podcasts, it is typically an image of the marketer or the coach, the podcast host themselves, like Stu McLaren, he's the face of his podcast. So that's definitely something that I see in this industry a lot is you see a image of the person that is speaking to you represented on their cover art. I personally like this approach. So if you have some recent headshots, consider incorporating them into your cover art or incorporating your logo or whatever piece of yourself. Don't get stuck here. And if you see this as a giant chore, then I'm going to encourage you to consider hiring someone who does graphic design to create this for you, because you want it to be the first piece of art and storytelling in this beautiful thing that you're creating. If you're seeing all of this as a really heavy chore, then it may be a sign that podcasting isn't for you. But we are telling your story. We are bringing your audience into your world. And in my opinion, one of the most intimate forms of connection, because it's not public where everyone can see who's listening, who's enjoying, who's commenting, who's liking. You can't even see the number of downloads my show has. There are no vanity external numbers. There's no followers. Like I see the numbers and I celebrate the big milestones on my social media, but it's very much removed from that sort of instant gratification that you'll get on a lot of social media. So consider the cover art a piece of the storytelling element. When someone searches your show, they're going to see your title and they're going to see your cover art, and they're going to start assessing if your show is for them before they even click play. So yes, these things definitely matter. Number 3, write your show description. You want to write your show description based onto your show pillars that you would have created after listening to episode 40. And this can be a couple of sentences. It should start with a summary or a little overview of your show. Get their attention and tell them, who is this podcast for? What value are you bringing to the table? And why should people listen? Then you can dive into a little bit of information about yourself, since you are the host bringing them this information. If they feel a connection to you and your story, then they're going to be more inclined to listen. So writing your show description, your content overview, why you are an expert or the ways that you have expertise in this field, and a little bit about yourself are all great things to write into your description. There may be a limit on how much you can put in, but I do think a couple of paragraphs is standard when you go look at a show. Again, do research for your particular market. I looked at the shows for marketing and the podcasts and the average lengths and that sort of thing for my field. So if you're a web designer, a graphic designer in the wellness industry, the wedding industry, then look in your particular industry and take a look at what several other industry leaders and experts are doing. And then that is a good indicator of how you could model your own. Number 4, pick your hosting platform. Okay, this is where things get a little bit confusing. So when you create a podcast, you are going to take all of your episodes and upload them to a hosting platform. There are a bunch of hosting platforms out there. They're all specific to podcasts. That hosting platform acts as the middleman. And so what you do is you upload all of your episodes to the hosting platform. That hosting platform is going to generate an RSS feed. Don't go anywhere. It's okay. I promise this is as complicated as it gets. And I figured all of this out through Google. So I promise you're smart enough to figure all of this out. I promise. This is really as techie as it gets. Okay. And you don't even have to think about it. The good news is that all you have to do is set this stuff up one time in the beginning, and then you can just upload your episodes and be done with it. This is not something that you routinely have to work through. This is just the setup kind of fee that you have to get through as a podcaster. So the hosting platform will give your podcast an RSS feed, which is basically a fancy term for a website. It's going to generate your own URL for your show. Then you are going to take that RSS feed. I'm going to keep using that word because I just want you to get familiar with it, because that is the part where I checked out when I was originally looking up, okay, I created my podcast episode. Now what the heck do I do with it? And I was like, what feed? Okay, I'm out. This is too much. So I'm going to keep using that word so you get familiar with it, because it's really not scary. Think of it as a URL. It's your podcast URL. You take that RSS feed, and then your hosting platform is going to allow you to link to different directories. I know this is a lot of new vocabulary. Directories is just the fancy word for all the places that your audience can listen to your podcast, okay? All the places that you go to listen to podcasts: Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeartRadio. Those are all directories. So what you do through your hosting platform, you are going to put your RSS feed, which your hosting platform is going to generate that for you. You take that RSS feed and you are going to plug it into all of these directories, because you want your audience to be able to listen to you anywhere you listen to podcasts. That's what that means. You want to be anywhere and everywhere, so that way it's super easy for your audience to listen to your podcast, right? This is all just work that you have to set up in the beginning. Once you are submitted to all of your directories, then every new episode you upload will appear on all of your directories. So you really only have to set this up once. This is as complicated as it gets. There are a lot of podcast hosting platforms out there. I use Buzzsprout. When I Googled podcast hosting platforms and I was asking my friends, this was the #1 ranked easy to use one that everyone was talking about. So that's what I jumped on into, literally knowing nothing. And it was very simple. They generated the RSS feed for me. They compile all the directories, and I'm talking a huge list, even some ones that I'm like, are people even listening on there? You know what? Doesn't matter. I want my show to be anywhere and everywhere. So there's this really cohesive directories tab that they have on their dashboard where you're able to see all of the places that your podcast can be. So it was very easy to set it up through there. Looking for a deeper way to connect with your audience? One way I stepped into sharing my message was through creating a podcast. When I started this show, I had zero experience with podcast hosting. So one thing that really helped me get started was how easy it was to host my podcast through Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout makes it easy to manage your podcast and puts all the analytics right at your fingertips. Buzzsprout gets your show listed in every major podcast platform like Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, so you're able to reach your audience wherever they're listening. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Follow the link in the show notes to get started with Buzzsprout today. And make sure to use this link because you'll receive a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, which could literally go towards purchasing a microphone to record your show. Take the first step in creating your podcast by clicking the link below. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. Let's do a quick recap. So we are talking about launching your podcast and all the steps that you need. #1, name your podcast. Number 2, create your cover art. So much fun, not stressful. Number 3, write your show description based off of your amazing show pillars. Number 4, pick your hosting platform. My recommendation is using Buzzsprout. Number 5, purchase your microphone. Listen, I have a different approach, I admit, because I came from the world of videography and video editing. But there was a saying in school that I was taught, and it is called audio before video. That was on a poster in one of my studio production classes because audio is so important. Audio can elevate your video so quickly. So please, 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 if you are going to invest the time into creating a podcast, you owe it to yourself to invest the cash into a decent microphone. And by decent, I mean nothing below $60. A good microphone is going to be $60 to $80. If you buy a $20 microphone, we are not friends. Not if you want to create a podcast. If you want to seriously create a podcast and create high quality content, then think about your audience. They have to listen to you every week. Don't you want them to hear just the most crystal clear, wonderful, crisp vocals from you? Don't you deserve to be heard through the most crisp, clear, amazing vocals? I'm not going to harp too much on it because that's really all I have to say. But purchase a $60 to $80 range microphone. I personally love blue, just like the color blue. You can find them on Amazon. I have a blue snowball. It's a very common mic. Looks like a ball. You can see it right here if you're watching me on YouTube. I know this is common for a lot of gamers as well. It comes with a little tripod, or you can put it up on an arm to extend, whatever works for you. But it's around, I think, the $60 range. So it's on the lower range. Blue also has some nice Yeti microphones. However, those are definitely a little bit more of an investment, and you do not need like the Cadillac of microphones to get started, but you do need to know that it's not going to be $20. This is not, don't do it. Okay. Don't do it. Don't purchase a $20 microphone. We can't be friends. All right. I'm going to trust that you trust me enough to invest because you will notice a difference. I promise. Number 6, record your intro. Once you get that microphone, also, if I did not mention this, you can find that microphone on Amazon. I don't know if I mentioned that. And in the free guide, I have a link to the one. It's not an affiliate link, but I do have a link to the microphone that I have. Feel free to peruse similar microphones, but I didn't go crazy into research. I just knew that this was a good brand and it was in the price range that I anticipated. So number 6, record your intro. Use that beautiful microphone to record your introduction. Your introduction is going to be a roughly 30-second recording that you do that's going to play at the beginning of every one of your podcast episodes. This is going to be what will acclimate people that are just coming into your funnel and your potential audience to see if your show is for them, to see if it's the right topics that they're looking for, if there's enough value for them, if they like the sound of your own voice. Let's be honest, if you could not stand the sound of my voice, you would not be listening right now. So lots of reasons to have an intro. I recommend having an intro, absolutely, because you want to attract new people into your business this way. And that's what tells them who you are. I mean, sometimes I start the show and I'm talking for a little bit, so they're losing that intro and I could be very rapidly losing their interest. So having that introduction is super important, especially to new people that are just being introduced to you. You can keep it roughly 30 seconds. You just want to put the meat and potatoes. Think of it as the back of a book. You have just that quick amount of time to get their attention. That doesn't mean you need to talk a mile a minute at all. You want to set the standard for what the pacing of your show is going to be like. So keep that tone, and just represent your show in a couple of sentences, a little description. You want to also speak directly to your audience. So maybe if you're using like fancier words in your writing, keep it chill. Like if one of your girlfriends was asking you, hey, what's your show about? How would you respond? In the Camera Brave show, I love to talk about all of the things that help us feel confident and amazing. Something like that, okay? So keep it casual. You may also want to consider, this is a part of your intro, incorporating copyright and royalty-free music. You can literally go to YouTube and type in royalty-free music and use that. So make sure that you cite where you got it from. I used Adobe Premiere Rush. Yeah, that's the name of it. As my editing software. They have a bank of royalty-free music already in their software. So that's where my music has come from. I think iMovie may have some royalty-free music. So there's lots of places where you can get this from. And you want to pick something that matches the tone of your show. I wouldn't say you have to have music, but I do think that it helps to set the tone. I personally, just a quick little tidbit about my music. So the type of music that plays in the Camera Brave show, it's in a genre called lo-fi, L-O-F-I. And it's this nice kind of beat music that it's not, well, it is mostly instrumental. However, it's not like classical, like it has almost like a hip hop kind of beat that goes to it, but it is all instrumental music that plays on top of it. That is the music that I personally listen to when I work. So to me, it was really fun to incorporate lo-fi music that I listen to every single day. I've built this company while listening to that music. So to me, it was really special to incorporate it. And since it's an extension of the music I listen to, I feel like it ties into the show. So pick music that feels your speed if you're going to include music into your podcast. And then another quick little thing about this, consider writing an outro. So this would be what would play at the end of all of your podcast episodes. I would say that this is optional. I personally did not create an outro. I still don't have one. However, it is now on my list of something to have, and I will have it in future episodes. But this is not something to get stuck on, but it's something to consider. And if you're going to do an outro, keep it short and tell people, thank them for listening to your show and tell them how they can connect with you. I do that at the end of every episode, so I don't have my own outro, but I am hearing it more and more, and I do not think it is a bad idea at all. If you're going to do that, add your music at the beginning during your intro and then at the end during your outro. Last but not least, number 7, the most important part of launching your podcast, setting your launching date. Put that date on the calendar. I mean it. Claim it right now. If you're just listening to this podcast, you haven't done any of these steps yet, claim that date. So that way it happens, because that's your deadline, your cutoff, your insurance that it's going to happen. And then once you picked it, tell somebody, tell your sister, tell somebody who works with your business, tell your mama, tell somebody your launch date. Because once you put it out on the calendar and you claim it, it gets a little more real. Once you put a name to it, it gets a little bit more real. Once you create the visual component and a cover art, it's a little more real. By the time you're adding your music and your intro, oh my goodness, you are doing it. You are doing the thing. And I want you to claim that, because you are creating something. And I'm very excited about this because I love my podcast. I'm very passionate about my podcast. And I love other people claiming their story and learning how to tell it and making a difference. Because being an entrepreneur, it can get really tough. And one thing that we can all turn to help us, one thing that I know I turn to for comfort, for encouragement, for knowledge and wisdom and tips and advice, is a podcast episode. They're short. You can take them anywhere with you. You can listen to them multiple times. There's something so incredibly connecting about a podcast that I I truly adore. So if you're considering it, keep in mind that you could be just affecting so many people that you don't even realize by having the courage to create your podcast and putting it on your calendar. Eek! So excited for you, my friend. As I've already recapped, if you're listening to this, you're probably pretty stinking interested in creating your own podcast. If you've made it this far, make sure you download your version of the launching guide that we can print it off and go through it. And if you have made it to this point in the episode and you are thinking, this sounds like too much, I do have 2 additional resources that can help you. First of all, I have a training inside of the Camera Brave Club that I created because there was so much buzz inside of my private coaching group about creating a podcast. One of the women was so amazing enough to tell the group that one of my episodes inspired her to create her own podcast. And then I have 2 additional amazing entrepreneurs inside of that group who are very interested in creating their own podcasts. So I created a training to show them exactly step by step how to do the whole hosting thing, because that can be a little hairy, scary. How to find your hosting platform, upload your show, get that RSS feed, get it into all the directories. I walk through step by step through a video training exactly how to do that. And inside of my group, there is also already available to my members how to record and edit episodes. So if those are things that you want to take on yourself, that you are ready and equipped and you're like, I don't know everything, but I know that I could figure this out, then joining the Camera Brave Club and getting those full resources, as well as the supportive community and accountability, may be an incredible next step for you. If this sounds like exactly what you're needing, head on over to camerabraveclub.com. If it's not open, get yourself on the wait list and I will send you an email the second that there is a spot open. Now, if you are busy, and I get it, entrepreneurs are busy, and you are just wanting someone to help take over the process of launching, someone to do the editing, to do the uploading, to help you figure out the things like the description. What the heck am I supposed to say in my intro? What should my show be called? What should my cover art design look like? And you are needing some more help, then I am very excited to announce that I am now offering podcast launching as a service. Because of the demand that I have seen and because of my own experience having created this podcast for so many amazing weeks consecutively, I am seeing that I can help alleviate some of the overwhelm that's preventing people from putting their podcast out into the world, because that is the important part, getting that message into the world. Don't let these little techie hangups or the overwhelm stop you. If you are feeling like you would just want someone else to take over for you, I would be honored to help you launch your podcast and edit your episodes. There is already one podcast in the works that I have the honor of helping to launch, and this is a brand new service. So I am still taking people on. I'm still ready to help entrepreneurs become podcasters. So if this is you and you are ready to take that next step and you just want someone to help launch the darn thing with you, send me a DM at Camera Brave on Facebook, on Instagram, or send me an email, better yet, at info, I-N-F-O, at camerabrave.com. And I would love to start this launching journey with you. Do not forget to download your checklist for this episode. Thank you so much for listening in with me today, friends. As always, you can find me over at Camera Brave on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I'll see you next time on the Camera Brave Show.